Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. She is a rising star in the world of professional wrestling. She's an interviewer, announcer, content creator, journalist, and also is a former dancer, musician, and pageant contestant, competitor. Pleased to welcome the one, the only, Julie Cutler. Welcome, Julie, to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you so much. What a lovely intro. I feel like you just put me over more than I would even put myself over. I appreciate that so much. And I'm really excited to chat with you today. I love the whole mission statement behind your show and just the idea of spreading positivity. So thank you so much for letting me be here.
I appreciate that, absolutely. So, talk to me about your childhood. Where are you from, Julie?
Sure. So I am from Western Massachusetts, which is kind of funny because I feel like most of the time when you mention Massachusetts, people automatically think of like Boston area. I actually grew up and currently live a couple hours away from Boston, way on the other side of the state, almost towards like Albany, New York, if you're familiar with that. And it's very, very different from Boston. This is a much more scenic area. The county that I'm from, Berkshire County, is very much known as being like a tourist destination, especially for people from New York City, because it's very scenic. We have a lot of mountains, and there's just like a lot of really cool artistic, cultural things going on, especially in the summertime. So definitely a hidden gem and a very beautiful place to grow up.
Yeah, I've definitely been out there a couple of times. It's very pretty, especially in the fall, just with the leaves and everything.
Yes, that's my favorite. And it's funny you mentioned that because I always grew up with like pumpkin picking, apple picking, apple cider donuts, like all of those like I guess quintessential fall activities. And we have all of this beautiful foliage and everything during that time of year, usually. And one of the times when I was down in Florida, I periodically travel to Florida for shows. That's probably the place I've traveled around a little bit, but that's probably the place that I like to go to the most just because I have a lot of family and friends there. And I feel like there's a pretty big wrestling scene down there. And one of the times that I was down there, I was at like a donut shop and I asked if they had apple cider donuts. They had like no clue what I was talking about. I didn't realize that that wasn't a thing that existed other places because it's just something that I'm so used to here.
Yeah, the culture's definitely different everywhere you go. It's like some places, when you mention soda, some places may say pop. It's like
Right.
it's different, you know?
Right. And I started to encounter that. I think once I got to be like college age, even within Massachusetts, like there were certain terms and ways of doing things that I grew up in this kind of more, I don't want to say rural necessarily. There's some areas of Western Mass that are rural. It's like rural, suburban. I'm from like a small city. But a lot of the people that I met that were from like greater Boston area, like the bigger city area, had like totally different terminology for things. Like I always referred to like the water fountains that you would drink out of in school. I always just referred to it as a water fountain. And when I got a little bit older, I realized that people refer to it as a bubbler. I'm like, never heard of this before. There's no bubbles coming out of it.
Yeah, it's a different term. So you kind of like everywhere you go, it's like a different terminology. You have to get used to learning about the lingo and everything. So that's kind of fascinating, getting to travel a lot and see different things, different places. Was wrestling always something you enjoyed watching growing up? Was that
Yes. So I probably started watching wrestling when I think I was about 6 years old. Like looking back on it now and trying to figure out the timeline, I think I was about six when I started watching. And I actually grew up with two older brothers, and then we had another close family friend who I consider to be like a brother. And two of them were getting really into wrestling around that time. And me being the younger sibling and wanting to be included and like do what my brothers were doing. And also just kind of like naturally being around it. Like I remember my brother was in the family room one day and he was watching, I don't know if it was on live TV because I think it was a Saturday. So I don't know if it was like one of the old shows that used to exist around that time. Like I remember there was like Jacked and Metal and
Yeah, like
Velocity.
it was like one of those B or C level shows they used to air like on the
Yeah,
weekends, like the recap shows almost.
exactly. Like I don't remember if it was one of those shows or if it was something that we had taped on VHS and we were watching
Mhm.
back. But I remember my brother was watching it. I don't remember exactly what the match was, but I'm pretty sure it was a Dudley Boys match. I don't remember who they were wrestling. But I just kind of naturally started watching it along with him. And then we started like playing with all the action figures together. We would play all the video games. Like I remember very vividly, we had like the very first SmackDown game that came out, SmackDown 2. Anybody with an N64 knows like No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, all that good stuff. So we would play all of those. And the thing that I think really lured me in at that time, being so young. Obviously, when you're that little, there's a lot of inner workings of the business that you don't really understand yet. And there's a lot of the technical wrestling side of things, a lot of the athleticism that I didn't really fully wrap my head around yet. But I think the thing that really drew me in at that young age was just like the storytelling and the fact that it kind of had a little bit, especially at that point in time, I feel like it had a little bit of like a soap opera-esque vibe to it, some of the stories that were happening around that time. And so that was really something that lured me in at a young age. And even being older now and being involved in the business, the creative side of things is still very, very engaging to me. I feel like sometimes, there's some people that get into the business and it's because like they want to be a wrestler. Maybe they're a great athlete, but sometimes they need more guidance with the creative side of things, which is totally okay. I think for me, the creative was like what really drew me in the first place.
Yeah, I think the important thing with because it's at the end of the day, wrestling, it's a television show. You're watching it every week and you want to have these characters be relatable and interact with the audience. So every week you want to see something different and see something new, see something fresh that people haven't seen before or haven't seen in a long time.
Which
And
is tricky to do, which is so tricky to do, I think, especially in this era in wrestling when there's so many different things that have been done in sort of varying capacities and slightly different iterations. And so anytime somebody is able to do anything that does come across as like more original, somewhat hasn't been done before, I am always very impressed and drawn to that.
yeah, I mean, the Attitude Era brought aboard so many legendary storylines. You had Austin versus
Yeah.
McMahon. You had Triple H and The Rock. You had the Nation of Domination. You had the rise of Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho and The Undertaker and
Yes.
Kane. And like all these different characters were involved with so many different storylines. And then you get to, the 80s, you had the stuff with Hogan and you had the stuff with Macho Man and what was Jake the Snake Roberts doing and Rowdy Roddy Piper. Fast forward a bunch of years, John Cena and Batista are the
Yes.
top dogs of the company. Eddie Guerrero's WWE champion. He's feuding with JBL. You've got the brand split. So many different things are going on at one time. Um, and it brings about so many people that are interested in this stuff. I mean, it's so cool and crazy to think about all these things that have happened 20 years ago and people still talk about it to this day, and it's because of the storytelling that's involved. I mean, think of the Bloodline as a perfect example of the modern era.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think that that was probably one of the best stories in the modern era. And the way that it spilled over into Cody's story, and the way that they continue to tell Cody's story is just cinema. I love it.
Who are some of your favorite wrestlers growing up?
I actually remember like when we had action figures when I was little, I remember I was very excited to have I had a Lita action figure and I had a Stephanie McMahon action figure. And I might
Okay.
even still have them somewhere in my basement. I'd have to go digging. But I was really, really excited to have those. I think Lita, Trish, even Stephanie McMahon as a character
hmm
was wildly entertaining. Also, I think it almost goes without saying that I think China was somebody who very much broke down barriers in terms of putting women on the same level as the men. I almost feel like whenever I see Rhea Ripley, I almost feel like she kind of gives me like modern day China a little bit. So in terms of women, like I feel like those were really the people that I looked up to a lot when I was little. When it comes to the men, I have a handful of favorites that I still consider to be favorites to this day for different reasons. When I was young, I remember something that actually was not well received online from what I have read, um, was the invasion storyline. And it's interesting because that was something that I was really like, that was very relevant when I was young.
hmm
And so I loved that story. And I remember Survivor Series that year. I actually loved that Survivor Series because I felt like it felt like there was actually a lot on the line. It felt like it meant something that year. And to me, Kurt Angle was like this one of the probably him and Stone Cold Steve Austin were like the stars of that era. And
hmm
I am not a big fan of drinking milk, just like straight up milk. But Kurt Angle was like the reason that I drank milk as a child. So he was definitely a huge favorite of mine. I remember when he turned heel, like that was a really big deal to me. Um, I also just think that he's an excellent combination of somebody who is a very, very talented technical wrestler while also having so many great character moments. And I think back to the Hall of Fame induction speech that he gave back in 2017 when he talked about how important those character moments are and how as time goes on, like people might remember that like you had a great German suplex, or people might remember your, submission finishers or whatever. You're gonna remember, some matches, notable matches here and there, right? But they're gonna really remember the character moments. And
hmm
so those are what you need to get over with the crowd. So Kurt Angle was my guy. Chris Jericho was always somebody that I loved. I kind of had a crush on him as a little girl. And also getting older, something that I really appreciated about him following his career is just how long he's been able to stay relevant for by reinventing himself time and time again. And he's done it in so many different ways that I always feel have been successful over the years as both a heel and as a baby face. I feel like sometimes people try to switch up their act because they feel like what they're doing is getting stale and they feel like they need to do something else to kind of reinvent themselves. And it almost feels a little bit forced. However, when Jericho does it, I never feel that way. I always feel like it's an authentic iteration of himself.
Yeah, when you see people like Jericho or even Undertaker who had made, several changes over the course of his career, he always had like the finger of the pulse to stay up to date and change with the times. And I think somebody like a Jericho was able to do it successfully and really made it work. I mean, everything from the Lionheart to Y2J to wearing the suits to
Yeah.
everything in between, all that stuff to what he's doing currently. Um, it really is phenomenal.
Yes, and actually, so there were a couple of eras that I especially enjoyed. I loved the whole era of putting people on the list. And it's really funny because I might actually have it here. I can pull it out really quickly. I have my very own. This was from years ago when I would go to like meet and greet events as a fan. It is a little bit beat up, but I have my very own signed list of
That's
Jericho. And it's funny actually because I remember I didn't realize this until after the fact, but I remember he went on some podcast at some point and said that if you bring him a list to sign at like in a meet and greet event, a signing, something of that nature, that he doesn't sign lists. However, I have a signed list from him and I have never heard of anyone else. And maybe there's someone else out there that has one, but if not, I may have a rare artifact. And it's funny because I got the signed list, and the same day that he signed it, I also had Mick Foley signed it. And Mick Foley was the first person that Chris Jericho ever put on the list in story. And he actually gave me sort of like the behind the scenes backstage story as to how the list came to be, which was pretty cool.
that is
Um,
fascinating.
so I loved that era. Um, and the other thing that I wanted to bring up, somebody else who I also really look up to, and I actually have had his entrance music as my alarm clock for a number of years now, which is pretty interesting, is Dustin Rhodes. And I particularly have an adoration for the Goldust character because I feel like that was a character that was very cutting edge for the period in time when he debuted it, especially. And I feel like it's one of those characters that very much could have flopped if it was executed by the wrong person or if someone just didn't have like 100% commitment to the bit. But the fact that he was able to pull that off, it is creative genius. And I also love his dedication now and over the years to helping the younger up and coming talent. I think that he is someone that exhibits a level of selflessness very regularly in trying to help others succeed. So he's one of my top favorites as well.
Yeah, I think that the Goldust character is very unique and something that I feel like very few people would be able to do that. Just like with Taker, that whole gimmick. I mean, they made it their own, and there was something special about that Goldust character that you look back at some of those moments, and you go, "Wow, man, it's
Yeah, well, because
unbelievable."
especially in the 90s, like I feel like that sort of gender fluid type of character, like this very abstract type of character, was very ahead of that time. And so, and it was bizarre. And so I think that if you had the wrong person doing it, like I remember Dustin Rhodes talking about that character in interviews and saying that it was a character that was created for him by Vince McMahon. And it just seems like if you had given that to the wrong person that wasn't willing to commit 100%, it could have just like completely went south.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I had a lot of admiration for the fact that he off the way that he did. And he, despite the character being maybe like a little out of comfort zone initially, just went all in on it and said, "This is what we're doing."
Hmm.
Commit to that.
Yeah, and so those are incredible characters, still to this day very timeless. But let's talk about your story because
Sure.
being a fan growing up, what point did you decide I want to break in this business? How do I get into the wrestling world?
So it's interesting because I feel like when I was young, I don't know if I ever had a moment of saying, like, I am going to do this, but I definitely thought about it and fantasized about it very much at different points in time when I was young. It's interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of manifestation, but I feel as though in some ways I almost like manifested my career for myself because I spent so much thinking and imagining and coming up with creative ideas of what it would be like if I were to be in the business. But part of me, to be honest, didn't know that it was something that I could realistically do. And maybe it's partially because in the area that I live in, like I don't have any notable wrestling schools or anything like that that are really like super close to where I live. Now that I'm a little bit older and I'm more in the know, I know more of the wrestling schools in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, surrounding area, but none of them are really like close to where I grew up. Like they're all at least a couple hour drive away. So I think when I grew up, like I didn't necessarily know that it was something that was within my reach. And I think also, at that point in time, like social media kind of came out as I was growing up, as I was in like middle school, high school, etc. And so I think that social media has definitely given people on the independent scene more of a platform to connect with other people, network, promote themselves, things of that nature. Where when I was really, really young, that wasn't really a thing yet. And so it was on my radar either. Interestingly enough, when I got a little bit older, I was probably 26 at the time. I was invited to do a wrestling podcast just for fun. And it was just kind of like a couple of people that had created this like community for fans called Nerds of Wrestling. And they had asked me because we had met at some different independent events and we had kind of connected on social media. They'd asked me if I wanted to show. And so at that point, I was kind of at a point in my life where I had overcome some different adversities and I was really trying to sort of branch out and allow myself to try new things. And I can get a little bit more into that story later,
Mhm.
but I kind of figured like, oh, okay, like they, invited me to do this podcast. Like, why not? What could it hurt? And so I did it with them and it ended up being a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it and we talked for maybe like 50 minutes or something like that. And I just felt like it was a really easy, fun thing for me to do. I loved talking about wrestling. And so I was lucky enough to have a couple of other contacts at that point in time that were also like in the world of wrestling podcasting. And so I started sending that podcast to a couple of people, and I was just like, hey, this is something that I did recently. If you happen to have the time to watch it and give me some feedback, I'd really appreciate it. And so I sent it to a couple of people, and then I started getting like, like, we'll have to have you on our podcast sometime. And so from that point, I started getting more in that world and I started doing wrestling podcasts a little bit more frequently and started doing podcasts that were sort of larger in viewership. I was lucky that I happened to be friends with Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful. He was one of those people that I had reached out to. And so he said at one point, oh, okay, we'll have to have you on our show. Maybe we could do like a prediction show together or something, which we ended up doing. It went really well. It was really easy for the two of us to banter back and forth. And so after that, I started doing AEW pay-per-view post shows. And that kind of snowballed a little bit because especially at that point in time there was a lot going on behind the scenes in AEW and so not only were people tuned in for like the post show feedback but I think a lot of people wanted to kind of see what was going on behind the scenes. For example, Double or Nothing 2022, that was when MJF had faced Wardlow and then kind of left. He didn't leave AEW, but he was off TV for several months. And that was when everyone was talking about him potentially like getting a plane ticket and not being at the event. And so I think a lot of people wanted to tune in and see what the backstory was with him, behind the scenes. And then fall that year, that was when there was a lot going on behind the scenes with the Young Bucks and CM Punk. And so, again, like there were a lot of people that were tuning into those podcasts. And so I was kind of in the right place at the right time in terms of getting good viewership. I think the very first one we did, I went on YouTube the next morning just to look at the podcast and see like what the viewership was just out of curiosity. And within the span of hours, it already had 35,000 views. And so I was like, wow, okay. Like, if I knew people wanted to hear me talk about wrestling, I would have done this a long time ago. And so started leaning into that more. And in doing that, there is a wrestling promoter that I am friends with down in Florida. His name is Dan Max Shaw, and he's the promoter of a really cool wrestling promotion that's very character based, and it kind of has like a wrestling comic book vibe type of crossover. It's called Pro Wrestling Action. And so he had asked me about coming to one of the shows, and I had said, oh, well, if I happen to be in the area visiting, I'd love to come. I'll let you know. And then he goes, we need an interviewer, dot, dot, dot. And so at that point, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll book my flight. And so that was how I started getting into interviewing. Once I kind of got there, we talked a lot actually leading up to that show, just so I had the backstory on all the performers, like their win-loss records, what their storyline was in the promotion, etc. So that once I got there, I had a good basis of what I needed to interview them about. And then once I was in that sort of like live show atmosphere, then I was like, oh, it was like, this is really fun. It was like, the podcasting is great and all, but like now I'm here and now I'm in front of a live crowd and now I'm like surrounded by all of these other performers. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I need to lean into this more. And so I started kind of looking for more opportunities based on that experience, in which I got involved in a promotion closer to where I live in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I had reached out to them initially thinking that I could potentially do interviews. Granted, they wanted me on board, and it turned out that they needed a ring announcer. So then I started ring announcing, and then um, I started getting more involved as I got to know more people and got to know more about the wrestling scene up here in terms of different promotions and different schools and things of that nature, being able to attend some seminars and camps, and then ultimately just using the experience that I have to start marketing myself on social media and trying to expand even further beyond sort of the experiences that I started with. So it kind of just it was kind of a happy accident in some ways that snowballed, but it's really funny because to circle back to what I said initially about manifesting, I feel like I spent so much time thinking and imagining what I would like a career in wrestling to look like if I were to ever be able to achieve that. And it just so happens like opportunity after opportunity that arises and that I actively seek out, it's like the bits are starting to come to fruition little
Yeah.
by little.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting yourself out there, you're getting to do all these incredible things, and you're
You.
marketing yourself. Yeah, you're welcome. You're marketing yourself, and you're able to let people know who you are, and doing the podcast and getting on shows, and all these things going on at once. I mean, when you're in the business, I mean, it is just an amazing feeling to hear the crowd and that energy. I mean, there's nothing like it.
And it's so crazy because like I was talking to a colleague of mine about this the other day. I feel like even though like now I've been doing this for a couple of years, I almost have a little sense of imposter syndrome sometimes, and I think a lot of people do. Like I pretty thoroughly prepare myself before any show that I do, whether I'm interviewing or doing ring announcing. I try to make sure that I have as many thorough notes on everybody that's booked as possible. Obviously, being wrestling and especially independent wrestling, there's some things that change last minute, people that might get booked last minute, things of that nature. But I try to show up as prepared as I possibly can with the information that I have in advance. And even so, it's like sometimes I have this moment before I walk through the curtain as we're like getting ready to start the show. In my brain, I'm kind of like, do I actually know what I'm doing? But then once I get out there and you feel the energy of the crowd and you're just like you're in the lights and everything and it all hits you and you kind of get in that zone, then I'm kind of like, okay, I can do this.
Yes. Once you know what's going on, it's just smooth sailing.
And the other thing is too, I feel like I've met so many people, so many amazing people. I kind of hate to use the term fans because at the end of the day, I'm like, I feel like we're all just people. Like, I feel like we're all on the same level. I like to use the word supporters sometimes if I can. Um, but I feel like I've met so many amazing people, especially performing at some of the same venues consistently over time. You start to see a lot of the same people in the crowd coming to see the shows over and over again. And so it's been really cool to be able to build a little rapport with some people. And sometimes it's hard, like when you're in the ring, to really see faces. But sometimes, like, I do look out and I'm able to catch a familiar face here or there, and it always does warm my heart to see those people that like consistently show up and support us. And so that definitely does not go unnoticed for anybody who is coming to shows, for anyone who's coming to shows and likes to do the whole meet and greet thing. I know, like, when I was a fan, I loved going to meet and greets and I love just being able to have that personal interaction with the performers and be able to actually have a conversation with them and like get a picture to show for it. That really meant a lot to me. And on the side of being a performer, on the side of being somebody in the ring, it definitely does not go unnoticed. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well as someone that's like been on both sides. It's really interesting being on the other side now. And again, sometimes having a little bit of that imposter syndrome of like, how did I get here? Because I did grow up as a fan, and in some instances where I've been lucky enough to be in locker rooms with people that I've watched growing up on TV, I'm kind of like, man, like, how did I get here?
It's surreal in a lot of ways because you work up to this moment and you know all the people involved and you're starting to go, man, I'm racking up all these different gigs and I'm going here, I'm going there, and I'm putting together like a repertoire, a portfolio of work. And the more I do this, the better I'm gonna get, the better I'm gonna sound, and just keep grinding and grinding and grinding until you know you've reached the pinnacle. And so far in your career, do you have a favorite moment, a favorite memory you want to share of your time so far in the business?
Yes, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is back in the fall. I think this was September of 2024, if I remember correctly. I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to do some backstage interviewing for a promotion called Big Time Wrestling. And it was a really cool show because it was a very interesting mix of some independent talent as well as some talents that have been signed to WWE and other places. And so it was really cool to be in that locker room and to be able to just like chat with, like I said, like a couple of people that I watched growing up on TV and pick their brains. And one of the people that was at that event, and I just feel like this was such a right place, right time situation. This was like one of the very few events where Sting was there addressing the crowd, like in full face paint and everything, since he had had his retirement match in AEW. I feel like at least at this point, I hadn't seen him do like a ton of appearances in full gimmick. And so being backstage in my brain, I was like, oh, like if I get an opportunity to chat with him, like now is the time. Like I need to, if the opportunity presents itself, I need to go up to him. And so after he went out and addressed the crowd and he kind of came backstage and was just sort of unwinding a little bit, I went up to him and started chatting and we had such a great conversation. And you can just tell that he is such a sweet man. And I just felt like he was so genuine and easy to talk to. And it was really cool too because one of the guys that I work with who does like photography and videography at some of our shows just happened to be standing by. And so he was able to catch like some professional quality photos and video of us. Before Sting and I parted ways, I told him, I said, this isn't the last that you're gonna see of me. Like I'm gonna make it on TV at some point. You will see me there. This is not goodbye, it's see you later. And he was like, I'm sure I will. And he had this smile on his face that just made me feel like there was this acknowledgement of I know I'm going to see you again. And so that was probably one of the coolest interactions that I've had thus far. Another interaction, one other thing that stands out that happened in October of 2024, and this was so much fun. I went down to CCW, Coastal Championship Wrestling, to do ring announcing there. And this was a show in Kissimmee, Florida. It's at a place called Sun on the Beach. And the main event, or one of the main events, was a championship match, a heavyweight championship match, but the challenger was a mystery opponent. And it turned out that this was actually Rich Swann's return to wrestling. And so I got to ring announce for him to the song All Night Long by Lionel Richie, which was so much fun because he just came out, he went through the crowd, danced with everybody. Everybody was just like losing their minds, having a great time. And actually, I've never seen this before, to my knowledge, in independent wrestling in the times that I've been a part of it or that I've watched, where like someone goes through their entire entrance song. Like usually they come out to the ring, they do their whole shtick and then they kind of fade out the music. He was so engaging with everybody in the crowd that like we literally went through the whole song getting him in the ring. So that was a really fun moment to be a part of as well.
Yeah, those are really good stories. I mean, having these interactions with all these wrestlers, rubbing shoulders and networking. What is like your ultimate goal? Like, where do you see yourself?
Ooh. So something that I have also talked to a few of my colleagues about is the fact that I think a lot of people in independent wrestling, whether you're a wrestler or you're in some sort of auxiliary role like I am, I think if you ask a lot of people, they're going to say, I want to be signed by a major company, which makes complete sense in the sense that most people with the love and the passion for wrestling that they have want to be able to turn that into a full-time career, get paid to travel and do what they love to do. And I think in my case, something that I don't want to get lost on me is I really just want to have the best time enjoying the journey and the creative process to get there. Like I love being able to create different sort of creative content for social media. Like anytime I have an opportunity to maybe do a new photo shoot, like if I have a cool idea for a new photo shoot that I want to do, or if I have some time between bookings and I'm like, oh, like I'll reach out to my friend Tony Miller of Toned In Entertainment, where we do interviews with various talent sometimes. And I'm like, let's get some interviews on the calendar. Like, let's keep making new stuff. So I just really love the creative process. And I think that sometimes people are so focused on the end goal of getting signed and sometimes getting signed to a specific company that it's like they're taking all these bookings and it's like, I need to be seen, but it doesn't seem like they're really enjoying themselves throughout the process. It feels like they're kind of going through the motions to promote themselves throughout the process. And so, as much as I would obviously love to be able to make wrestling and entertainment a full-time career, I kind of have faith, a blind faith right now that if I keep doing what I'm doing and I keep trying to grow myself and pursue different opportunities that wherever it is, wherever the right place for me is to end up, I will end up there in time. And so I'm, obviously trying to keep an end goal in mind, but I'm just really trying to lean into what can I do to stand out. I think maybe that's my goal is what can I do to stand out and what can I do where if someone's just scrolling through social media and there's a million independent wrestlers and interviewers and ring announcers and people on your social media, people coming up on your explore page, whatever it may be, what can I do to make someone see my content and think she's special? We're interested in her, as opposed to, okay, this looks like the 10 other people that I was just looking at. That's my goal. That's my biggest goal is how can I be different and how can I set a new precedent for what someone in my role can do in wrestling. I think also there is sort of this expectation that you kind of have to be one thing sometimes. Like if you are an interviewer or you're a ring announcer or you're a wrestler, it's like, what do you want to be? Are you on the broadcasting side or are you on the wrestling side? And I think that sometimes I've had conversations with people where there's this kind of question of like, what do you want to focus on? And there's part of me that really values um, being well-rounded and being able to be talented at a lot of different things. And so sometimes I struggle with that question because I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, I want to prove that I can be proficient at all of these things. I want to take all of these things seriously to some degree. I don't necessarily want to fit in a box. Like I am just an interviewer or whatever it may be. And so that is something that as I continue to grow myself, I'm hoping that I can really prove the legitimacy of that mindset and showing people that I am serious about being proficient at a number of different things.
Yeah, I think in this day and time, especially, it's good to stay true to you and your goals and values and the parameters of all that stuff, and also learning new skills, being versatile. I think we have the internet and with our phones at our fingertips, you can look up how to shoot video, how to do lighting for different setups, and how to conduct interviews, and all these different things you could get at the drop of a hat if you just punch in, all these different things. It's amazing what technology and the power of technology can do nowadays because it's a whole nother ball game now. So
Absolutely.
you have to really take that to heart and keep that in mind. So I like that,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I
Yeah.
think also like there's along with what you were saying about like how-to videos, there's also like there's just so much content out there. Like if I want to study interviews or I want to study ring announcing or if I want to get like creative ideas of like something that I can do in my social media to kind of like just keep creating and keep pumping out new content. Like there's so much out there to reference, to draw inspiration from, to draw ideas from, that it's like the possibilities are endless. And I think that sometimes, like, for example, I try to stay on top of certain things. Like I feel like social media is such a powerful tool and it's like free advertising at our fingertips. And sometimes people don't take full advantage of that. And I try to stay on top of certain things, for example, when it comes to like merchandise and things like that. I feel like some people, you might create a pro wrestling tee shop or whatever it is, but then people don't know that it exists. And so you're not really getting like the full bang for your buck in making one and having one exist. So I try to think of different things over time, like if I can share like different supporters and colleagues and people wearing my merchandise, like new pictures of different people wearing my merchandise, or if I have a graphic that I can make, if I can think of like new and creative ways to promote something to just remind people, like, hey, this exists. I've noticed that that's actually really effective. And so just try to always think about like how you can stay on top of things and also in doing that, like, are there ways that you can change it up a little bit so you're not
Hmm.
sharing the same thing over and
Mix it
over
up.
again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all the strategies and techniques. You just have to learn what works, what doesn't. Experiment is the key because you can think
exactly.
of so many different things you can do, and if you find something that works, stick with it and continue to build on that. It's a process. It really is.
It is. And I feel like I'm only scratching the surface, to be honest. I feel like I'm still in the early stages of building. But like I said, I want to enjoy that. I want to enjoy,
Yeah.
I can have goals and have aspirations of where I want to be, but also just accept and enjoy right now and have the most fun with it that I can as I build it into something
Yeah.
greater, hopefully.
Absolutely. You had a story that you wanted to share with our viewers and listeners. You had talked about overcoming adversity. Tell us about that.
So I went through this is kind of a lengthy story, and there's a lot of detail that I'll probably skim over as I tell this because it's a lot to explain. But more or less, I went through some really challenging times in my life in 2020 through like 2021 in particular. Obviously, 2020 was a very challenging time for everybody because that was the era of COVID and the world shutting down and just like completely having to find new ways of how to do things, whether it was work or like just connect with friends and family, get our groceries, all of those kinds of things. And for anybody that was affected personally by COVID during that time, obviously it was a really challenging time from a medical health perspective as well. But for me, there were also some other layers to it because my father actually passed away right before COVID began.
So
Um,
sorry.
thank you. It was just, weeks before the whole world shut down when my dad passed away, and maybe like the week following, once we finished kind of doing all of like the funeral and sort of like festivities. And in Judaism, I was raised Jewish. In Judaism, we don't have a wake, but we do something that is called a shiva, where people kind of come over to your home and you have food and you chat and remember the person. And it's just like an opportunity to just connect with friends and family and have people in your home and kind of just have that familial support. So as soon as we had finished doing Shiva at our home, it was like the following week, basically, the entire world shut down. A lot with just having my father had been ill. We had been through a lot in the caretaker roles that we had been in leading up to my father's passing. And then immediately afterwards, we are hit with COVID. So definitely a really challenging time in my life. In the meantime, a couple weeks prior to my dad's passing, I actually experienced one of the best days of my life, which was when my nephew was born. And he is the absolute love of my life. To this day, we are very, very close. He, I believe, really taught me a lot about the meaning of, truly unconditionally loving someone. And he brought so much light and joy and positivity into my life in a time where there was a lot of darkness. And so I'm so, so grateful for him. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But unfortunately, just weeks after he was born and after my dad had passed and COVID began, unfortunately, my sister-in-law, his mother, also unexpectedly passed.
Oh, I'm so
So
sorry.
I'd gone through two major familial losses during this time. And also then dealing with COVID and also trying to be a support for um, my nephew and my other family members who were experiencing this loss at this time, especially because my nephew was a little newborn baby. My brother, his father, is such an incredible, attentive father, but I wanted to do whatever I could as he really hands-on during that time. So, like I said, there was a lot of loss and a lot of darkness during that time in my life, but I'm so grateful for the bond that my nephew and I had. I get emotional thinking about it, but he really brought me the joy that I needed to make it through that time in order to stay afloat. And so, fast forward to 2021, back in 2019, prior to all of this happening, my mom had also been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which she was a fighter through, and she actually went into remission for quite some time. Um, and we had a lot of fun times together. During COVID, she was actually a really fun support for me because when I was working from home, she and I would spend a lot of our days together and we would spend a lot of time with my nephew and we would watch TV together. We had like our shows that we would watch, our soap operas and our Today Show and things that we'd watch together during the day. And I'm so grateful that we got to spend those times together. But fast forward to 2021, her cancer returned. And again, I was very much in a caregiver role and just dealing with a lot of grief and dealing with a lot of responsibility. And so in the fall of 2021, um, I felt that, I realized from a mental health standpoint, I was really struggling and I felt like I kind of lost myself. Like I was just exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted. And I kind of made a conscious decision at a certain point in time that I wanted to start to make some changes in my life in order to spend a little bit more time investing in myself and kind of doing something for myself because like I just been through a lot up to that point and I was like I feel like I need to change it up a little bit and I need to do something for myself that will bring me maybe a little bit of like new excitement in my life. And so at that point in time, I had been thinking about doing this for a while and I hadn't gotten the courage to do it yet, but I actually signed up for the Miss Massachusetts USA beauty pageant. And so I competed in that in 2022. But through the process of preparing for that, I just, decided if I'm going to sign up for this, I really want to invest 100%. I don't want to sign up just to sign up. So I started working with a personal trainer named Elena, and she's still one of my closest friends to this day, and I still train with her. And it has been a couple of years now. So we started training together. We put together a nutrition plan. And so I started changing a lot of how I look at nutrition. I changed a lot of aspects of my diet. We started doing life coaching together because she also has a life coaching certification. And then in that same time frame, that was when I got the opportunity to start doing wrestling podcasting. And at that point in time, I was very much in the mindset of like, okay, well, I want to make some life changes. I want to make a point to invest in myself a little bit and just invest in my own self-care a little bit. So why not try it? Why not put myself out there and try new things? And it was challenging because I had a lot of anxiety. I've I've been someone that has struggled with anxiety in the past. And so to make that initial step to put myself out there and trying new things was really hard because unfamiliar equals scary. And I think oftentimes in my brain, I would jump to like worst case scenarios of like, oh, well, what could go wrong if I sign up for this? Or what could go wrong if I do this podcast? Like, well, say the wrong thing, and offend somebody, something like that. My brain would just spiral. I would spiral into worst case scenarios. And because of that, I would be afraid to try new things. And I kind of had to push myself to make a conscious decision at that point in time to say, I'm just going to sign up. And once I'm signed up, I'm committed. And so that was kind of how everything got started. And so, along with my wrestling journey, I was on this pageant journey. And through doing that, I was kind of on like a fitness nutrition journey, which has also, I think, tied in very well to wrestling. Um, and so, and I think ultimately it all benefited, despite the pageant world and the wrestling world being kind of like two separate things. I think it all benefited me in terms of building my confidence and giving me the tools that I need to be successful within wrestling. And I've met so many incredible people and new friends along the way, and people that are like minded in terms of being very growth oriented. And so I went through a lot personally to, I think, push myself to a point where I felt maybe it was time to, despite the struggles that come with mental health and dealing with things like chronic anxiety and things of that nature, it really pushed me. Like I had to
Hmm.
fight for weeks to say like I'm gonna get out of bed and I'm just gonna do one small thing today to make my life a little bit better. And it got a little bit easier as the days went on. And I was really lucky to have great family support during that time. I remember there was like one day I was really struggling and I had spent a lot of time in bed. And I remember one of my brothers just decided like we're gonna go on like a little day trip to like one of the college towns that's like close by to where we live. And so we went on, I got myself, it was like probably the first time I'd like gotten myself out of bed and like dressed and ready and made up in so long. And we just went on a little day trip. And there was another day, my other brother was like, we're going to go out to dinner together. And he took me to a diner that I really liked. And again, it was like one of the times where I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to put myself together. And so I'm really grateful for the friendship and support that I have from them because they helped me a lot during that time as well. But I really had to like push myself, both utilizing professional resources as well, professional mental health resources, while also just trying to fight and use the familial and friend network support that I had to just make little changes to kind of dig myself out of this very dark place that I was in.
Yeah, I mean, and you've persevered, and when you go through a lot, it just takes so much out of you, but you really have to find it in your heart to overcome all these obstacles. And the fact that you're able to go into compete in the pageant and do everything that you set out to do, I think it's remarkable and incredible that
Thank you
you
so
were
much.
able to go on that journey, absolutely, and to find yourself because you never know what people are going through. People struggle every day, with something, and you really have to find something to pull yourself out of it and try to better yourself as much as you can.
Absolutely. And I feel like, from there, I talked before about like the concept of manifestation and the concept of how like I kind of started doing one thing in wrestling and then it sort of like snowballed into the next thing. And I feel like these past couple of years, I've been on this amazing little journey. And I'm just excited. I have some really exciting things coming up over the course of the next couple of months. I have some new promotions that I'm planning on debuting for. I'm not quite ready to announce all the details yet, but once I'm given the okay to go ahead and share some of those details, I'll definitely be sharing that on my social media. And like I said, I've just been able to meet so many incredible life-changing people. Like I've met some really, really close friends through wrestling. And I've gotten to meet some of the people that I grew up watching TV, which has been so cool. And some of those people, it's really heartwarming when you do meet them and you get to work with them behind the scenes and you realize that not only were they like your hero on TV, but they're actually really cool people in real life too. I feel like I've had a lot of just uh, out of body sort of like imposter syndrome moments these past couple of years, but I'm extremely grateful despite some of the adversities that I've overcome, extremely grateful for some of the experiences that I've had, extremely grateful for my family, my brothers, and my nephew, especially, and just like everybody who's supported me along the way. So we're
Yeah,
just the only way to go is up.
exactly. And when you talk about mental health, I think it's a subject that so many people need to talk more about. What's your like go-to for just getting yourself out of that space?
Couple of different things. I think sometimes there are days where like I'll have a training session scheduled at the gym and maybe I'm not having the best day, maybe I'm having a really tired day and it's kind of like, oh my God, like I have to get myself ready to go. But then once I do, I feel much more energized and like I said, I absolutely love my trainer and she's become a great friend of mine and she has changed my life for the better in more ways than she probably knows. Um, but I always leave the gym feeling, even if it wasn't like my best workout, I'm always like glad that I did what I did. Um, and I'm really proud of the progress that I've made over the past couple of years in that regard. I think sometimes just like little self-care things, like sometimes I'll be like, I just need to like wash my hair and like do my skincare routine. And it's just something as simple as that, just like putting myself back together a little bit. Um, Sometimes like it usually I always tell people if my nails aren't done, I always like to have my nails done. My nails aren't done, that's how you know that like I need to get my act together. So once I get my nails redone, I always feel that just the little self-care things. And then the other thing is like spending time with close friends, family, like having really a really good talk with like a close friend, spending time with my nephew always uh, is a great cure if I'm not, not feeling my best. He always makes me laugh. And so he always puts me in a good mood if we are able to like have a little play date, spend some quality time together. So I would say those are kind of like the big things for me. Also, sometimes you just need to like nap it off. Sometimes like you just get really overwhelmed and really tired and you just need to reset. And you need, eat something good. Um, Self-care, those self-care things.
Those are very important. I just think that can help go a long way, get you through so much pain and heartache, and overcome the odds, overcome obstacles, and makes you feel real good once you just let all that stuff just go, die,
Yeah, I mean,
and
like I said, it sounds silly, but sometimes I'm like, even just the simple act of like, I take a shower and I, dry my hair, and then I feel like I'm at least like put together a little bit
Mhm.
again. Sometimes it's just that simple act of self-care where I'm kind of like, okay, well, at least like I'm kind of ready to like tackle the day now. Like if I wanted to leave the house and do something, I could. Sometimes it's just that little like invest in yourself effort,
Mhm.
which
Well,
can be easier said than done sometimes.
mhm.
But sometimes it's the little things.
Absolutely. Well, Julie, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. I want to say thank you for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to
Thank
my
you so
listeners
much.
and viewers. Where can people find more about you on social media and find out about all the cool things you're doing?
Yes, so I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram account is at the Crown Jewels. Crown is spelled with an E at the end. It's the old English spelling. That's just how we roll here. That's always what I tell people. So I'm most active on there. That's where you can follow me, and I'll always share things about upcoming podcasts that I'm doing and shows and things of that nature.
Love to have you back on. You're more than welcome to come back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.